Well, hey there, folks. How you doing tonight? Welcome back to the Opening Minds channel. Glad to have you here. We've got a lot of folks here and a kind of very exciting show for you tonight. You know, these are very, very interesting times. We're seeing a lot of new evidence come forward. And sorry if my screen looks a little green. Maybe it's ET green. I'm not sure why that is. It's fading. It's a kind of a lighting issue. Well, you'll be able to hear us fine. Hey there. Let's see. Julie, Thomas. Double echo. Hold on a second. Let me turn the volume down. Hey, let's see. Is that a little better on the double echo? Okay. Julie Thomas. Sunsaver, Jay, hey everyone, thanks for being here tonight. This show, I got the idea to do this show to bring David Noble Whitecrow back, Brother Whitecrow, in a moment. I was reading again. Aha, Thomas, it was you with the double echo. You see, that's called projection. But anyway, thanks. So, just to let you know, before we get to David tonight, we're going to be having Terry Lovelace back on Tuesday to talk about his exciting new book, Devil's Den, The Reckoning. I'm going through these fascinating stories that he collected from readers who wrote in their stories. Excuse me. These are the best type. And it includes a farmer from South Africa who, this is unbelievable. Friend calls him and says, you have to come over. The guy goes over, sees 4 shiny discs over, I believe, a wheat field. And there are swirled patterns of wheat below each of the craft in a spiral shape. Just like we've heard in the past. This is only in 2014. And then another farmer reports it a couple days later. Hey, he calls this guy, I found these crop circles in my field. This is just 6 years ago. So it's still happening that these objects, the propulsion systems or whatever, are leaving. Yeah, it's not easy being green, Jules. That's right. You think how it feels. These crop circles are still happening. I always knew they were made by UFOs, even though people made a bunch of them. It doesn't mean that the discs didn't leave a bunch of behind too. I talked about it in Black Swan Ghosts. So I love it. New evidence, and it just brings it all forward. Hey there, Mike. Happy to have you here tonight. So the reason why I wanted to do the show with David tonight is we've talked to David before. We've done 9 episodes with David. We're going to have him here on the phone because I found that this is the best audio that we get from David because Skype can be a bit complicated and so forth, and microphones and bandwidth and all that. There was another witness. You remember in the past that David has talked about Operation Dominic, a series of about 31 nuclear weapon tests in the South Pacific, many of them off Johnston Atoll. Some of them were at Christmas Island off of the coasts of Indonesia, where there were lots of UFO sightings, according to David, from his viewpoint being aboard the USS Finch. And David Noble Whitecrow served in the U.S. Navy for 20 years, 1960 to 1980. He ended up serving on the new paper on crop circles. Thomas will be looking for that. David ended up even serving on the Nimitz, the infamous Nimitz that we've heard about so much recently. David was there. David, it turns out, had lots of contact with his officers who told him about the fireflies, the bogies. And I was talking with him a week ago, and I realized we need to get him back because there's a lot that he probably didn't feel comfortable sharing the very first time that he was on the show with us. It was way back, David reminded me earlier, in December of 2018, and we had just gotten to know each other. And he only shared some of the story of his experience aboard the USS Finch, Operation Dominic. And he's has more stories. And I said, David, we have to share this with the public. This has to come out because his officers knew what was going on. That's what we're going to find out about tonight. So let's give David a call without any further ado and proceed.
Yep.
Hey, brother Whitecrow, are you there?
Hey.
Go ahead and turn your volume down if you're watching any YouTube or anything.
Okay, you want me to turn it down?
Yeah, otherwise we're going to have another double echo, not just from Thomas. Yeah.
Okay, give me a chance here.
Thomas is double echo. We're going to be hearing this on a delay. Yeah, we just have to have you. So we're...
Are you there?
Turn it down, David, all the way.
How's that? Go ahead and turn your volume
I can still hear myself in the background.
How's that? Is that better? Turn it down? Yeah, otherwise we're going to have...
No, you got to turn it all the way off, David.
Yeah. Okay, give me a chance. Okay, it's off.
No, I'm still hearing myself coming through your phone, David.
Is it down? It's off.
I can hear it. How is that possible, David? Oh, turn your speakers off, too. Just turn your speakers off completely.
Okay. Hey, Robert, help.
Just turn off all the computers and everything, because otherwise we're going to get our conversation coming back in a 5 second. Okay.
Robert, I need your help. Turn off my speaker.
Hold on 1 second, folks.
How's that? How's that?
That's better. Okay, David, how are you tonight? I still hear a little bit coming through, David.
Okay, how's that?
Great.
I can't hear him. Robert, get over here. I can't hear him.
David, how are you doing tonight?
How's that? How's that?
Sounds great.
Yeah. I'm fine. Thank you.
So, David.
Do you hear me?
Yeah. Yep. Do you still have some speakers on in the back? Nope, I still hear some echo, David, going on in the background. Just pull the plug out of the wall on the speakers. 1 second, folks. And I'm going to find... David, just turn off the volume on anything you've got going there. It's just our phone conversation here. How about that?
Robert, will you please get over here? I need you.
Hold on a second, folks.
I got to just turn the speakers off all of a sudden. What's going on?
So what we're going to do, folks, is... Hey, David, are you there?
Okay, do you hear me?
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good.
Stick around. Okay.
So, David, how are you two doing tonight? How's it going?
Oh, I'm doing great. I'm sorry we've had difficulty.
Oh, it's no problem. This often, if you ever listen to Coast with Art Bell, this would happen a lot of the time that the people would have their, the audio on from the broadcast itself. And I don't blame you for watching my channel. But the feedback...
Well,
yeah, it's a couple...
I'm inspired. I hope I look like you when I'm 34.
Okay, thanks very much. You too, David. Let me put your new picture up that you sent me. Thank you very much for the photos.
Okay.
You sent some new pictures in, and I'm going to put this one on. So there we have you on the screen now. And this is a picture that David sent me. David, you had a long career in the Navy, and we did our first show about this incident. And before you tell us your story, I'd like just to read you this case number 3 from Terry's new book, because there's another witness that came forward from the nuclear weapons testing in the South Pacific from 1955. Is that okay?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Yes, it said, "Hi, Terry. My name is Elliot, and I'm currently in a Boston suburb. I'm retired from the restaurant industry. I had a couple UFO sightings in my life. The most dramatic happened when I was in a U.S. Navy stationed out of San Diego in 1955. I was on board a ship. I won't name it, and it doesn't matter. We were headed for the South Pacific because of some secret nuclear testing. I worked in the galley, nothing glamorous, and the mission had nothing to do with me. My job was to feed people. So we were at sea on the third night of port. It was about 2 a.m., and I was making sandwiches for the guys on watch when I heard the klaxon sound, general quarters. That means every man to his post. You might think of it as battle stations. It's the highest alert status." And he goes on to say, "I dropped my apron, ran to the duty station, which was topside. I had a decent view of the sky towards the stern, and it was a crystal clear night with a 3/4 moon made visibility decent, especially when our eyes grew accustomed. The sea was calm like glass. I was with a guy named Tony from Florida. We were sneaking to smoke when both of us saw a silver cigar-shaped object surface about 100 yards off our port side. We thought it was a submarine of some kind. The odd thing is it never broke a wave when it surfaced. How does that happen? We were probably doing 20 knots and this thing paced us for a couple minutes. Then it lifted out of the water and shot out of sight in an almost vertical climb while still oriented horizontally, and it never broke a wave as it left the surface of the ocean." So this object comes right up on their port side, paces them for a few minutes, goes straight up out of the water into the sky without breaking a wave. It just made me think a little bit of Kevin Day's description of the Tic Tac dropping out of 80,000 feet by the Nimitz down to 50 feet over the water without making any sonic booms, which is not possible with the technology that most of us are aware of. In any case, he said they stayed at their... And I'm just reading this to you, David, just to get your reaction in a second, so just bear with me. He said, we stayed at our station for about an hour till the executive officer, the XO, grabbed us, all us guys who were topside, took us to a briefing room where we sat for 45 minutes in silence. Finally, the XO came in with 2 guys in suits. He had a manila folder and passed around a piece of paper to every man. He explained to us it was an NDA, or a non-disclosure agreement. We were ordered to read it, and if any man didn't understand it, he was to raise his hand. A few people did, and the XO explained it to them. It was our promise not to ever tell anyone what we saw. He never explained to us what we were supposed to have seen, just that we couldn't talk about it to anyone ever. The guy in the suit said, "You can't tell your mother, your sweetheart, a shipmate, your priest, or the family. If you do, you risk a dishonorable discharge, going to Leavenworth Penitentiary, or paying a big fine." And then he went on to say they were lined up single file. They had to show their ID, and they had to sign the documents. Then they had to empty their pockets. They were frisked, and they were looking for cameras. And then they were ordered, in a very harsh way, no scuttlebutt. Right? I guess you know what that is, Dave?
Yeah.
And then a helicopter came from another ship, and they couldn't explain how it got there so fast. I mean, he said there was all sorts of nuclear testing going on, and all of a sudden the helicopter shows up. Now, the guy who had been in what they called the radar hut, the chief radar guy, was... he said we were friends and we'd had a few beers. And then he found out that the guy in the radar hut was no longer aboard anymore. And he went into the chopper with the guys in the suits. And he never saw him again. And no one ever saw him again. Now, based on your experience, David, how does that seem like a credible account?
Does he name the ship he was aboard?
No, he won't name which one it was.
Well, that alone makes me kind of suspicious.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it kind of makes me suspicious. if you're going back that late in time, where mine is bumped forward to 1962,
Right.
It reveals to me that there's some discrepancy in it. I'm not going to say that it's totally. And if it is, I'm honored.
Yeah.
If he is faking it, but the fact remains is there's not enough doc. From the very beginning, Doc, I gave you my, all my records. I've given you my assignments. I told you where I worked. I told you what, if 20 years in the Navy, I was putting that up front.
Right.
And if you're not prepared to do that when you give these stories, then you're just giving a story. You're not giving facts. You're not giving the docket.
Sure, but I mean,
there's no meat on the bone.
Right.
But,
sure, but
before we go any further, I got to do this. This is mandatory.
Yes.
This story features photos, support, and commentary, actions, opinions presented by me, David Noble Whitecrow, a.k.a. Eagle Dawn. They're not necessarily endorsed by the author or channel host, Dr. Simeon. I leave any and all conclusions to the individual members of the audience and offer no statement of facts beyond those available to me that I give to you on this show and through diligent private research or through information freely available in the public record. So with that, we can go forward and you can go ahead and ask the question. But
yeah.
I want to give a backstory before we go, because it's very important that the audience understand why we are actually giving this podcast as a follow-up to the last one.
Sure, go ahead.
The whole purpose of me coming forward, Doc, and the audience picks up on it, was for me to kind of test the water, to see if we're going to get other people to have enough cojones, huevos, to come forward and reveal what they experienced too at that period of time.
Sure.
So the information I incorporated stuff that I could have been court-martialed for. I could have pulled other people in because it went beyond the boundaries of Navy standards for uniform justice, UCMJ.
Sure.
It was all kinds of stuff there that people, if they wanted to assemble something, could have yanked me out of my rack like they did in boot camp, take me to court-martial, for hazing. But they didn't do it. So I feel comfortable in revealing some things I haven't in the last 9 episodes. Details and instances that'll blow the cap off your toilet. Now, because my son came into my life in 2005, I had to be careful because I had an income, I had Social Security, I had all this stuff. As a single parent, you single parents out there understand how difficult it is to survive just on the peanuts they give you for the great jobs you've done and dedication and loyalty. The patriots out there who deserve to be quadrupled in their income these days, but they're not. My whole point is from 1961 to 62, moving forward, I want to give the audience the complete details of some of the topics that you're going to introduce. And I'm just pleased that you've decided to have this podcast so that I can go forward and feel comfortable. I feel really comfortable. I feel that the audience who's taken an interest in my story going way back to the time I was born to the present, they're captivated by some of the things that I've had to purge because it was very difficult to live with. So, Doctor, let's take it forward. I'll let you lead, you know. Well, and
we have
I hope everybody enjoys the show.
No, great. So, before we get into some of these specific, when I mentioned this, that there was another person that had come forward from the nuclear testing. Now, Operation Dominic that you were in was the name of an operation that took place in the South Pacific, specifically in 1962. And there were other operations, Operation Fishbowl and others, to do this sort of testing that you observed personally. Does this account have any similarities to your experience? Were you asked after the sighting that you've talked about to sign an NDA? Were you frisked? Was there any search for cameras, so forth? Does any of it since we don't know who this person is, and I can understand why they wouldn't just put their DD-214 right into Terry's book. I mean, they're anonymous at the moment. And you've given me your DD-214, but I haven't posted it online. Does any of this account from this person have any parallels to your experience or not?
I think there are parallels. I went down in Paris to the personnel office below the galley after we had the sighting, and we read the riot act. I don't have to go in details. I had to also sign a disclaimer that, forfeit all my pay from the point I entered the service and have 20 years prison time if I reveal to my, any family or continued conversation on the ship. That's a similarity, but mine goes a little bit beyond where I have to incorporate some of the things I didn't mention.
Sure.
Everyone and there was about, I would say, a half a dozen or more of us who were on the starboard side when we witnessed. The moment we left that station, we were assigned an enlisted rank person who was two E's above us. In other words, if I was a seaman, there was an E4. The second class petty officer who was monitoring me 24/7. He was like my hip buddy. He'd go to chow with me. He'd watch me take a shower, take a crap. He wanted to know if the other ones were passing notes to each other. They wanted to know if they kept a ledger, or they would check the locker to see if they had a journal after the experience. They couldn't send any letters home. Everything that was sent to the ship's post office to send to families, whether it was an allotment check or whatever it was, to sustain their families, they would be opened, and then they would be, given back to the individual to reseal and watch them put it in the mailbox. Because they didn't want the general public outside the military to know exactly what happened to the USS Finch. At that time, we spotted the UFO. And I never mentioned that in the first episode because I was afraid that the detail I would incorporate would be so precise that I wouldn't even have my son to this day. I could be locked up, you see. And so now I feel comfortable, and I'm not saying they can't take me out or they can't ruin my career now as retired or whatever, but it's out there in the open.
Right.
Everybody knows. See? And they'd only be stabbing themselves in the back, making it more authentic and more credible if they took me away right now.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So are you saying, David, that you were assigned somebody to make sure that you not only didn't talk about what the USS Finch was engaged in the weapons testing, but for this specific UFO sighting that you were...
Yeah, it only happened to me and the other witnesses after the sighting. We were each assigned a petty officer 2 grades above us.
Yeah.
To be in the compartment. They would be like changing of the guard. There would always be 1 or 2 drinking coffee, listening to conversation. We went about our business. I mean, we had to continue our job. They didn't lock us up in the brig and wait till we got back or anything like that. We still did our work, but they would always be around. Just like if you went to North Korea, you'd have these secret agents following you around.
Yeah.
That's the way it was with us on the Finch.
Okay, so in your encounter, the interesting thing that I found that paralleled, let's see what he's called, Elliot's encounter, is that he said that there were these general quarters sounded, the klaxon sounded, for a high alert. And he was ordered to go topside. Were you ordered to go topside also?
No, as a matter of fact, I was walking in the passageway, and the character that I was having problems with, he bumped me in the shoulder and knocked me across the passageway when the ship's alarm went off, and general quarters was announced, all hands man your battle stations, and it was en route to my 5-inch 54 mount that I controlled with the fire control man. I had to, be the manual in case the fire control system went down in the 5-inch 54 forward gun on the bow.
Right.
And before I could reach it, the Master Chief grabbed me by the shoulder, and another guy going in the opposite direction, just as we were going to break, going on the starboard side out the hatch, and he says, "Stay right here, don't move." And then that's when he collected more individuals and assigned them to man the rail right there before we could go further to our battle stations on the bow.
Got it. So you're, excuse me, you were already by the rail there when you were ordered.
Yeah, if you show the Nimitz, the starboard side, you can see the overhang. That's where we stood, right below the control bridge.
The Finch, I see. Okay, on the starboard side. So you have a blue dot here.
Yeah, that's where we stood. That's where we were.
And this is where you were when you saw that. I'll put up a picture of it, by the way, from the previous.
Yeah.
You saw a cylindrical object with what you described as a plasma blue glow coming from behind it.
Yeah, it was like a fog, but it was like if you had a cigar and you blew a ring. You know how you blow rings with cigarettes, the smoke ring.
Yeah.
That's the way the plasma was on the rear of the cylindrical shape.
Yeah.
Was with about 200 yards in length, and it was only like 14 degrees off the horizon, the sea, between the sea and the horizon.
14 degrees.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
And during this incident, were you ever told that this was some sort of naval test, that this was classified naval technology or something that the U.S. government possessed? Or
No. We, like I said, we were just tagged. We were grabbed and told to report to the starboard side railing and to look forward and hang on to the railing, because the ship was taking pitches. We had choppy seas, and we were heading into the wakes and the breaks, and that's when they said eyes left, and that's when it came into view, and they say fix your sight on the object and follow it down range, and that's exactly what we did. But as it moved aft from the ship, because we were moving forward, I had a real good look at this thing, and that's when I said, "Geez, it looked like a giant cigar-shaped cylinder." The aluminum type. Yeah, no markings, not a single marking, no graphics, no signs, and it was kind of like what you call brushed aluminum. It was not reflecting any sea or sun or anything. Yeah,
and you follow this object, it goes towards the horizon. You don't see it enter the water, but you see it kind of approaching the water at a distance as it's going out of your field of view.
Yeah, in perspective, it was converging toward the horizon at the same elevation, and as it went beyond the Finch, it got smaller, of course, but it never left the exact altitude. Mm-hmm. But you could tell from the station point or the perspective focal point, that's where it was headed. So it got smaller and it got closer to the horizon. Okay. I never saw it enter the sea. If that's what you're asking.
Okay. And immediately after this event, were you told not to talk about it? Were you guys asked not to sign an NDA? Was there anything similar where they said, "Don't ever mention this again" at any point after that event? Or what, in your words, what happened after the sighting?
Well, after that, I don't know the exact time, but it was the same day. All hands by compartment. In other words, if you had 30 men in your compartment, that they would call to the compartment to go on the fan tile. Because if you had everybody go there that wasn't standing on watch, the fantail just couldn't hold the numbers. So our division was called with another division to show up with just our skivvies, T-shirt and boxer shorts, and our thongs or slippers, and take our cameras. If we had Polaroid cameras or if we had Kodak box cameras, whatever kind of cameras we had. And, when I heard the word, I thought, hell, we're going to go out there and it's going to be a field day. We're going to have R&R. We're going to take pictures of each other. And I thought it was going to be a picnic, a barbecue on the fantail. But when we arrived with ourselves and our cameras, we were told to sit down. So if you got a picture there of a group of people, pertaining to that assembly, It was similar with the exception that the picture you might have doesn't show everybody with a camera sitting down with their legs crossed, okay,
Right.
in their T-shirts and box shorts. But it was a large group with a single officer in the center, okay. We were wrapped around with our backs to the lifeline and the other equipment that was there. We had depth charges, and we had the 5-inch 54 mount rear there. We had a lot of stuff there. But we managed to sit there, and then he would explain to us that we were to take the cameras and put them in a gunny sack or a pillowcase that was being brought around to each group or individual.
Yeah.
And we would put our cameras in there and not to expect them back.
Not to expect
And if we had film in our lockers immediately after being dismissed, we would have to go pull the film out of our lockers and take it back onto the fantail. They would give us 15 minutes before the next group would come out, and it would be repeated.
And this was in response to the sighting of, did they call it a bogey? How did they refer to it, David?
They referred to it, as a matter of fact, they didn't call it anything. We called it a bogey. I didn't know the terminology, UFO, flying saucer, or anything like that at the time. And, of course, when we were debriefed and we were ordered down, me and this other guy, to the personnel office, we had to strip down completely and to pass our clothes through the door behind us. And they were returned in less than a minute. And we were given the riot act then. Well, this deal on the fantail, having to turn in cameras, we were warned that there's going to be unannounced locker inspections to see if anybody failed to turn the camera in.
Wow.
Unannounced.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
unannounced. Yeah. And it would be, they would look under our racks, our fart sacks. They call the mattress in the Navy fart sacks, okay? And they would look in the linen. They would look in your private areas, of your locker, put lockers under the canopy beds were three sets high, and each one had a separate foot locker. So they'd look in there, also looking in what I call a gym locker, upright lockers, four to a unit, and they would just purge everything. They were polite. They didn't throw shit around like they do maybe in the prison. They would put everything back according to how they found it. But it wouldn't be the entire compartment at the same time. They would pick like maybe a dozen out of the total population of your division and do it. So they didn't want to have dysfunction.
Yeah. So they weren't kidding at all about what.
No, they weren't kidding at all. No. And here's the thing: they didn't just do it to the dozen who witnessed it. They did it to the entire ship, personnel, officers, and enlisted.
Yeah.
Because as you remember and recall some of the episodes I talked about, there were individuals that actually cheated and wanted to see what we were, ordered to witness.
Right.
Yeah. So they had to do a house cleaning. They had to do an overhaul to make sure if any of those peeping toms, I called that the name I gave, the bogey peeping tom, they would catch them. They wanted the letters. They wanted anything that sketches. They wanted if there was anything associated with what occurred that day.
Got it.
Yeah.
Was anyone taken off the ship specifically in regard to this UFO sighting when you docked the next time?
Well, like I said, and I didn't reveal this before, I might have mentioned it, I was not allowed. I don't know about the rest of the guys. If I was to say any of the individuals that witnessed the UFO was in my division, I can't. I was so stunned by the experience. I didn't pay attention if they were from the same compartment or department, which I was part of, the bosun's locker. Okay, First Division. I can't tell you that because the guy that went down to the personnel office with me, he was not of my department, so I wasn't paying attention that much. But I would know if he was a fellow shipmate that was in my division. So most of the people that, at least I know for myself, I can't speak for the others, but I know the one. I didn't know who went ashore and who didn't go ashore, but I didn't see any of the people that watched, because I remember faces.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see any of them go ashore when we went back to our home port. So obviously they weren't allowed to go ashore either.
Mm-hmm.
We had to stay on board for another tour at sea after that.
Right. So, and tell me if this is something I shouldn't be bringing up. You mentioned to me on the phone, which I really haven't been able to forget about, that you were not allowed off the ship for a number of operational cycles after
That's
this.
Correct. That's correct. I wasn't even allowed to pass notes to a friend to drop off at my residence ashore in San Francisco. No one was to take messages to dependents of personnel who were kept ashore, for security reasons. And the wives and dependents would have to call the ship executive officer. They had special phones set up to talk to families, explaining that there was a security risk to let these individuals out. This was officers and men that enlisted who knew about this. The only one that was able to leave the ship was the captain and the XO, but they couldn't leave it together. One would go and the other would stay. And upon return, then the other was allowed to go, and they were escorted by shore patrol. Mm-hmm. And taken out in a Marine band. It wasn't a Navy band. They were Marine bands. So it was really strict. It was really strict. Yeah.
Wow. There's just some discussion here. Were there different USS Finches? Someone said one of them was destroyed in 1942.
I'm sorry, I didn't get that.
Someone's saying here that there was an original USS Finch that was destroyed in 1942 during World War II. Is that right? It has a long history. There were different Finches over the different periods.
All I can say is go to PDF.
Yeah.
Look up USS Finch, and it'll give you a complete biography and history of the ship.
Actually, Jason.
And all I know about the Finch after, and I don't know when it was decommissioned. From what I understand, what my research said, that first they had to find out if it was radioactive because it was there, during Operation Dominic.
Yeah.
But even at the years after it continued in service, they had to go run it through the gauntlet to make sure there was no radioactive parts or pieces.
Oh wow, I get it. Yeah.
They had to go through it to find out if there was any film, photographs, ledgers, logbooks that mentioned the UFO sighting. They had to strip it, and then they gave it to Mexico for target practice. That's what I found out.
Wow, for target practice. Okay. I've heard other naval ships. I remember once when I visited Cape Cod in Massachusetts, there was a target ship out there in the bay that when I first went out there as a young kid, my parents brought me out there. It actually sunk eventually, but so they did have these target ships. That's right. So getting back to the story, David, and we've got quite a lively, I don't know if you have your computer, we've got a lively comments, and we'll get to some of these questions towards the end. That anyone has. I'm looking at them as they go across. David, and again, if anything I say here goes beyond what you're comfortable talking about, feel free to let me know, okay? But you've mentioned that there was a UFO officer aboard. Is it the Finch and the Nimitz?
Yeah.
Can you talk? I mean, because this is something that the average person has never heard of before. And I want to thank you for feeling confident enough to come forward with this. This is important information. There was a UFO officer.
Here's the deal, too. I never mentioned before, and I didn't take notice until I was aboard the Nimitz. And some of the people, like the first-class photographers that worked in the Intel Center aboard the Nimitz, were sent to a special school to I guess to be more familiar with unidentifiable objects that were not in the military dictionary or James book when it came to aircraft and ships. James book is the popular military breakdown of military hardware and technical things, but they had to go to school to see photographs, to see that were taken of UFOs at that time, bogies, and study them. And so that when they looked at the photograph or the film that came back that was taken, of these objects by fighter jets or helicopters or whatever it was, they could evaluate and classify these bogies into a separate category, because some were cylindrical, some were pie-shaped, and some were odd-looking, and that's what they did. They were specialists in that field, but they were selected from the division in the Intel Center by rank. It wasn't a second class, it wasn't a third class, it was either a first class, E6 and above were allowed to go to that special school.
I see. And this,
so you can call an enlisted chief, a bogey officer, or or a first class bogey, leader or person who was responsible for taking all the information down and recording it and sending it off to Washington, or hand carrying it. Yeah.
So these people, I mean, is this something that you gathered through scuttlebutt, so to speak, or were you told that there was an officer on board responsible for monitoring?
Oh, okay, this is where it gets really sensitive, because
sure, just whatever you're comfortable.
If people can cross the T's and dot the I's who are listening, they probably hope that it doesn't tag them as the person I'm referring to without giving names or physical description. But there was a group of officers and chiefs that would get together aboard, for example, aboard the Nimitz. And when I was in the Intel Center, because of my interest in bogies, I was invited to their card games below decks, and they would never use the same compartment. Each time we would have a gathering, and there would be a dozen or more of us, and just standing around talking about these strange phenomena, from USOs to the sounding reports coming from sonar, and they would have printouts from the radar systems that would show, these facets. They were fascinated. They were just fascinated. They weren't kind of like ufologists or wanting to solve the puzzle of what these things were. They just found it fascinating, but they had to do it privately. So we would show up at an undisclosed location, and there would be a dozen of us or more, officers and myself, and we'd be talking about it. We'd be drinking coffee, having a soda, and just because we found it fascinating. Okay, what could it be? The questions were, what could it be? Hey, Dave, can you draw a picture of what I described?
Right.
Okay,
right.
This is what I saw when I was on the F-14. Okay, because we'd have pilots in there too. This is what could you draw it for me? Could you, this is, and I would draw just like a crime, portrait artist. They'd be talking to me, and I'd break out my my tablet and my charcoal or whatever it was, and I would draw these bogies. Yeah.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense to me. And this is what you've said to me, David, from the beginning is, excuse me, your position as an artist gave you lots of communication with these officers of things that they might not say officially, but they'd ask you to draw them, right? And
yeah, and then before we leave, they'd have to crumble it up, and someone would stay behind and shred the drawings or something. Nobody was allowed to keep any of the drawings. It was just to be shared among us. I think there was one second class, there was a first class, there were two chiefs. I didn't even know these people. They worked in different other departments. They could have been radar men or fire control technicians. I don't know who now they were. But everybody seemed to know who I was. And the commander who had me at every one of these, below deck gatherings, I don't want to mention exactly, anything more because somebody could figure out who it is.
Okay, fair enough. Now, some of the pictures you sent me, I'm particularly intrigued by what there's another, I mean, you're saying so many things, and I want, again, this is such fascinating information. We haven't had many people like you come forward and be so, specific about it. You sent me some pictures earlier today, right? And one is anti-submarine warfare weapons being dropped on USOs. Is that correct, that they were using USOs as to what was going on there? Were they intentionally trying to damage them, or what?
Well, this is scuttlebutt, and this is my imagination working, and it wasn't a download from my channeler, in San Diego. This is just something I came up with myself because I can vividly see the events happening. There would be general quarters set, and then there would be an announcement that hedgehogs and depth charges would be released as an exercise, And it was exciting to most of us enlisted men who worked on the deck because we used to paint these containers. We used to, keep them bright and shiny with the brass fittings and shit like that. Excuse my French, but, to see them actually functioning and operating, being, a jettison from the ship on the stern or on the side of the ship, it was like, wow, I had something to do with that. I actually painted that thing. That's how it was when I was 18 years old. But to see these things go over unannounced at general quarters, I said, well, what the hell's going on? They usually give us advance warning. There's going to be drills tomorrow. There's going to be sea exercises. There's going to be general quarters. Get your gear ready. Because damage control people, each had an assignment for damage control and all sorts of stuff going on. But this, when they didn't give you no announcement, they just sent general quarters, and they started dropping these hedgehogs. They started dropping the depth chargers. And then later on, when it was all clear, you're down in the galley eating, the evening meal, and gossip is going on, and you think, well, hey, why did they do this? How did we, that was well, someone says, hey, the skipper decided that he didn't get a response. He asked permission from, the Pentagon if he could drop some depth charges on, an unknown USO bogey, and he was given permission, and we did the pattern sweep that DE's destroyers do when they drop these things. They don't go in a straight path. They do a strategic patterns, and then they do that. Nothing came up. There was no oil slicks. There was nothing that came up.
Nothing came up. So they are dropping
nothing
these.
Nothing came up. No.
You call them hedgehogs, and I've got the picture up on the screen of these are these are mines, right, that go below the surface? Yeah,
they're set. You can set them for depths.
You can set the depth.
Yeah.
Nothing ever came up from dropping? No.
No oil slick, nothing. And then, of course, sonar would report whether or not the object was still in the vicinity.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. But, that detail I know nothing about, but that's, you could watch war movies and sea battles and understand basically what they have to do.
So, going back to I'm just thinking of things that are underwater and how the U.S. Navy is interacting with these objects. You didn't see the object that came over that night. You didn't see it land, but you later talked to the Master Chief Diver, who you're convinced actually was sent down to look at the object, right?
Yeah.
It's the same. He
was a second-class diver.
Second-class diver.
At the time I met him, he was a Master Chief ready to retire in a few weeks. But he was a second-class diver out of Pearl Harbor in a salvage crew that went out to the spot where the UFO I had spotted back then had actually went into the sea. And, of course, the armada that went out there, it was immense. Not just the U.S., but, Canadian and British. And the only ones that didn't participate in the research armada but were on the outer perimeter were the Russian ships. And but later I found out that was their post. They became the picket ships, keeping everybody out of the general area where this thing was still at the bottom of the ocean.
The,
that was their task.
Did I hear that right? That the Russian ships were used as picket ships to keep.
Yeah.
This was a.
But they weren't small, just destroyers. They had big cruisers out there. They had guided missile cruisers out there, keeping everybody out. Commercial ships and airplanes and all that other stuff. It was kind of like a bubble. They protected the area. They guarded the area. While the other countries that were there, Australia, United States, England, and I don't know if the French. I think the French were out there. They had smaller craft out there. They had a special group out there. Yeah.
So this is an international effort to recover this. What was a UFO now is under the water. It's a USO. There's an international
it was international, and from my back research, I didn't realize it until I had done some really deep research on the material I had, that the Russians and the United States, along with England, were all part of a UFO, USO contingency to defend the Earth against potential invaders, and they proved to these aliens. I have I have what I know, what my channeler tells me, and I also know that the government and the average person, they've created their own interpretation. So I'm going to go with the interpretation the general public has and what they've been given. But the truth of the matter is that Russia, British, and French, and the United States together were demonstrating to the aliens, using atomic weapons, that they could take them down. That we were not going to lie down and take anything that these invaders, or whatever they wanted to call them, wanted to come down and rule. And so that was kind of a back and forth thing until the United States, and in the United States, the Navy was given absolute authority, over the Air Force, over the Army, over the Coast Guard, over the Marines. The Navy has absolute control over the UFO, present UFO subject when it comes to national defense, in case anybody doesn't know that.
Got it.
Yeah. And this goes back to the Bay of Pigs. When Russia and the United States, everybody thought that we were going to have that nuclear war with Russia, because they were bringing the ships with the missiles over to Cuba, the Cuban crisis that I was part of. Well, I come to find out, they weren't threatening the United States. The United States and Russia were preparing to have a battle with the ETs, because right off the Gulf of the United States and South America, there was a base. There was an ET base, I guess you want to call it, down in that general area, and they had been getting monitored for years and years, and so they didn't want to expose the reality of that until it came to that point in the Cuban crisis, what we call the Cuban crisis. People don't know that when Khrushchev came over here in 1958, that was the sole purpose. He was having a conference with Kennedy on the subject.
Yeah, that has been suggested a number of times, and it suggests that there's a hidden history here. It's
I'm just saying, from my records, I've assembled that. It wasn't confirmed by my channeler. It wasn't, this is just my overview, because I was part of that history. I was part of the Cuban crisis. I was part of, Operation Dominic. So I think my experience and what I've been doing this for over nearly 60 years, looking at this work, okay? And this is what most of it, when I'm referring to Russia, United States, cooperating with England and France and Germany, this is what is going on. This is what's going on.
David, did anybody see the UFO leave the water in the international contingency that you've referred to? Did it leave, or what happened to it?
Well, you're talking about the one that went down?
Yeah.
Or are you talking about, has anybody reported seeing these
No,
UFOs
no,
come and go from the ocean?
No, the one that you saw go over, and then the Master Chief Diver who you talked to, who actually told you he was going to write a book about it, but then he died.
Yeah, well, when he went down and refused to go down the second time.
Yeah.
Okay. They had to airlift him by seaplane back to Pearl Harbor. But his fellow shipmates stayed on station along with other salvage crews that were ordered on site from, there were some repair ships that had salvage crews on them from other countries. Like they have repair ships,
Yeah.
And some of the personnel on those huge repair ships, they have their own salvage crews, and they sent them out there. But when they least expected, and this was just before nightfall, complete nightfall, the UFO that they were monitoring. Now they were sending down divers. Each country had their own. They had their own little thing going on. The full length of this thing, not 200 yards. Come on, there's a lot of ships lined up to see who's going to, get the blue ribbon to tap into this thing or figure out how to, haul it up. So it was kind of competitive, but the event that followed surprised the entire armada. Whatever reason, it just came up off the ocean floor, was just about to break the sea surface, but did not. It didn't create any wakes or waves to, cause any of the vessels, huge vessels. There was a couple carriers out there, guided missile destroyers. There was a lot of vessels out there from different countries. But none of them got capsized when this thing just started to move gradually like a giant fluorescent tube under the water. And they watched it, as it left the barometer.
It just...
They couldn't start here. Now listen to this. This will really blow you away. The ships went dead in the water when this went on. The chief was told that when he was in the hospital, the guys who had been there, the guys that he worked with, said that every ship in the barometer, foreign, and I'll say U.S. domestic, went dead in the water. All engines, all electrical generators, everything on each one of those battle wagons, battleships, carriers, destroyers, they went dead in the water, no power. And they just watched this thing float away under about, 10 feet under the water surface, and like a huge, giant fluorescent tube slowly creep away. Now,
wow.
That's really something. And when it was out of sight, everything turned back on. The engines, like they had never shut down, the lights, everything. Yeah.
This is just incredible. I don't know what to say. This is so many UFO stories, whether it's people driving through Wyoming in the middle of the night or anywhere, New Hampshire, and having their car stall when a craft comes over. And now you're saying it happens to an entire fleet, an international armada. Everyone loses power as this object moves away.
They lost the power as it was passing them. If you use your imagination a little bit, the armada, if this thing is 200 yards long, and you have international armada, everybody has their own barometer.
Yeah.
This thing could go for a mile or better. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, the implications of this are so huge. If people that are listening right now, I mean, what this suggests is that there is an alternate history that we haven't been told about. David, right? I mean, not just a military history, an international history, diplomacy history, internet that somehow you've come across from your role in Operation Dominic. That if you and I had never talked, I still wouldn't know about this, and neither would most of our listeners right now, unless they came across another veteran like you that had experienced this.
Well, you got people like in Israel that general, whatever the hell he is. He's saying, "Hey, they've been here. They've always been here. I've known about them."
Yeah.
He's had, you know, I mean, he's not somebody you would say he's a kook, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And what more evidence do we need, with the exception of what's locked up under in the cellar at the Pentagon?
Do you feel this secrecy is justified? I mean, let's be realistic here for a second. You served in the Navy. The Navy is a branch of the U.S. military. It deals with threats. It's defending the United States. Is there justification to treat this subject with so much secrecy? Who is someone just protecting their cover here, or is it justified at this point in our time in 2021?
Well, I think it personally, I think it's justified, and I'm only using what I know and what I've been visually, channeled down, is that ETs have been here long before the human race ever evolved, and they continue to use this planet to share the knowledge with other ETs that come and go. Okay, they have their own pecking order, and it's not just one race; it's many races of ETs that, like certain bandwidths, we can't see. Well, there are bandwidths in the ET realm that come here that we don't see. They walk through us, they walk inside of it, they pass through us when we're on the shitter, or we're eating, or we're at school, or we're on our job. They're present 24/7. Okay, mm-hmm. And our senses can't pick it up. We can't touch them, we can't see them, we can't feel them, we can't hear them. But they're there, and they're in the millions that have been here long before the human race evolved. And I haven't asked, and I don't care to ask, whether or not the human race is a byproduct of their research or whatever, because I'm a very strong Catholic, and I don't care about that. What I care about is the now, and the benefit. There's a great benefit of knowing that the United States, in particular, with some other countries, has and I'll say this, and the people don't like it, the United States has the trump card. Okay? They have the means to protect the United States and other countries. And the ETs respect that, because they don't want to lose their ability to continue coming here and learning from this planet. What nature can teach it, what it has taught it. And, our culture, our history, human history will come and go. Long after we're gone, the ETs will still be here. Okay? But there are those rogue, maverick ETs out there in the universe, but they still have to deal with those two. They still have to deal with the social issues and problems. Now, I never asked about a visual response to drugs in their world, or divorce or anything like that. That doesn't concern me. What does concern me is what happens to each individual after they pass on, when they pass away.
Right, and we've talked about that.
I don't want to get into that. Maybe another day. But anyway, go ahead and ask me another question regarding some of the things I posted.
So we're going to get to the crystal spheres in a second that were found. Okay. Let's get to that in a second. But what is the connection between these UFO sightings and PTSD? You've mentioned there were some casualties of people seeing these in the Navy, possible.
Well, I'm only speaking of the group that I was part of that witnessed the one, in Operation Dominic.
Go ahead, tell us.
Yeah, there was one individual. I later learned, because I didn't see him. I didn't know he was part of that group, but he was from my division. And I didn't know this till years, 15 years after I was out of the Navy, that he was part of that witness group. But he actually committed suicide because of the nightmares and the drinking and the drugs to erase what he had witnessed. After the witnessing, the initial witnessing, if you recall, I told you the Master Chief of Gitmo, and me included, would see these hideous creatures in our dreams, and his lasted for like 13 years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, this individual enlisted guy that was in my division, I discovered later, he couldn't handle it. He got discharged. He got dishonorably discharged. He was only a seaman apprentice, I think, in E1 or E3, and he got he got kicked out of the military. He went into a life of drugs and crime and stuff. He ended up killing himself, committing suicide, and it was all based on his his illness.
So this is stress that's caused by people observing these events during their service in the Navy, and
well, yeah, you have on record, my man, that military individual that after he witnessed what he did, he became an artist. He got interested in gold. He got divorced. He went crazy. What was that syndrome he said he had? I forgot now. I have to look at my records. But he came out with a syndrome, being a UFO witness. Actually seen a UFO or had connected with a UFO. What was that guy? That chief? What was it? You remember? And anyway, so it's beyond that with a lot of individuals, civilian and military, depending on the exposure. Now it's all about exposure. Some of these documentary hypnosis reveals when they go aboard these spaceships or whatever, and they're poked here and poked there and having sex and all that other stuff. I don't know about that.
Did you say, David? Did you say a few minutes ago that people were given drugs to erase their memories of these events? Did I hear you correctly, or were they started using drugs afterwards?
Well, the military would give them sedatives, of course.
I got it.
And then when it wasn't working, when the bodies got immune to it, they went on to street vendors. Yeah. Street vendors. I did the same thing. When I got out, I was doing everything. Until I had that near-death experience, and the good Lord straightened my shit out.
You talked about that. I remember that in, I think, episode 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Very powerful.
Yeah. It's and to this day, I have all kinds of we can talk about that later. What's my opinion? Why have I, for 78 years, been able to? Well, I think it's this. Did you get that picture I sent you with that movie star?
Yeah, let me put that up. I want to ask you about that too, and we'll get to the spheres in a second that you found floating in the ocean. You had a picture of, is it Richard Egan? Is that?
Yeah, Richard Egan, a famous movie star.
You met Richard Egan
in Pearl Harbor after Operation Dominic. They wanted to give everybody kind of a R&R, rest and recreation, and he happened to be at Pearl Harbor, Waikiki Beach.
And there he is. And this is a picture of you with him.
You see the photo of me there kneeling down.
Yeah.
We went on to have a walk together on the surf, and just out of the blue, he just came out and he said, one day you too. And I said, what do you mean, Edgar? I said, what do you mean? He says, one day, I predict one day you're going to be sharing your story about your experience in the South Pacific. And I blew me out of the water. I didn't know what he wanted. I was thinking, because I was only 18, 19 years old, I said, does he mean I'm going to be a movie star?
Right. And here you are.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, that's what I thought when he told me that back then.
Here you are, sharing the story years later.
Oh, well, thank you. That's kind of a compliment, but it's not. I was looking at Fame and Fortune.
Yeah.
On the sidewalk, but no, and he was a cool guy. He was a cool guy, and so that's why I thought it would be really nice to just post him, because he had something to say that was related to what I'm doing right now. Yeah. He
did. How old are you in this photo? You look pretty bronze in this photo.
Yeah,
pretty buff.
I was 18. I was 18 going on 19.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think I would have wanted to mess with you at that age, David, but...
Well, I had this delusion, and I think I didn't mention this before, but when I used to be in my mother's chapel chamber, couldn't read, I'd look at pictures of Samson, you know.
Yeah.
So he was kind of like my hero. So I grew up wanting to lift weights, but I couldn't grow my hair long in the military. So
Right. You got the military haircut, and it looks like Richard has a kind of interesting hairstyle there for the time, right? What?
Yeah.
He was anticipating the future. What year is this, by the way? This photo.
That was in 62.
62.
Yeah.
Wow. So
Yeah.
that's a great story. So, David, what is this about these spheres that you found? Let me see if I can bring them up. What are these?
Spheres.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you know, what are you going to do out there besides drills and pass time reading books and playing cards? The skipper would take these calm sea days where the wakes were not so high and the sea wasn't choppy, and you could see for miles. And we would often keep our eye out for these bobbing net spheres that would break away from fishing trawlers from the Orient or wherever Portugal had some fruit. But and it would be the prize of the person who spotted it, but it would take the crew of the deck force where I worked with grappling hooks to bring them ashore. But the skipper looked at it like, well, I'm going to give my ensign, my officers a chance to control and, the ship and get close to these things, maneuver, like you're going to do maneuver to a pier or, an anchorage or whatever. So he would pull alongside these buoys, these fishing net buoys, and haul them aboard, and it would be the prize of the lookout or the guy below who came up and spotted it, and it's his. You can take it home for a souvenir.
I got it.
Well, this particular day, we spotted this sphere, but it was the size of a volleyball. It wasn't as huge as some of these are, basketball and larger size by comparison. And when they brought it aboard, it was right away. I thought the sun, because I'm looking over the railing at the time with a couple other sailors, coaching the guy with the grappling hook, because he wasn't doing it right, We thought we were going to lose it on the, And so what happened was when it got alongside the hull of the ship on the fantail, where you have to hook it from the rear of the ship on the port side, and everybody trying to tell the guy who's using the grappling hook how to do it, and he's getting all angry and upset. And so at the end of the grappling hook is kind of like a fishing net, right? So he manages to hook it into the fishing net, and I thought the sun was reflecting on this to give it a kind of a glitter, kind of a sparkly look, because it was wet, and the sun, this thing rolling around in the water as it was coming alongside, the fantail of the destroyer. But when he picked it up, it was still glistened. It was still sparkling. And I thought, I'm going to get a better look at this thing. Well, about that time, I guess on the bridge, the deck officer and the captain and the XO was looking through their binoculars at the fantail where all the activity was going on when it was being brought aboard. So the next thing I know, as it's being laid onto the deck along the railing, the chief master at arms and his first class assistant pushed everybody aside with a bag and says, "Step back, we're recovering this because the skipper wants to investigate what it really is." Okay, and I think, oh shit, is it a bomb? Is it, what is it? What could it be? Because I'm looking at it, and it's got all kinds of, like, what we would call today electronics contents. But it was sending out these little sparks. Have you seen those globes that are electrical, and they put out these little shock waves, these little electrical?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's what it looked like back then. They didn't
like
have
the Tesla experiments where the ball is emitting
plasma.
Yeah,
exactly. That's what this thing was doing.
Wow.
So I thought, what the hell is that? Well, I didn't have a chance to get a closer look, but I saw that emitting sparks, on the inside. Little lightning bolts and shit going on this thing. And it was only the size of a volleyball.
Huh.
And so, it was no net on it. There was no net, and they picked it up, but he put it in this little sack, and it was gone. We never heard any more about it. And that was really weird.
That was really weird.
Yeah. So I'm going to just put this out there, folks, and I don't have no proof. My channeler didn't confirm it. I think it was ET. I think it was a probe. I think it might have broke away from USO. I think it was intentional for the Finch to bring it on board. It could have been, something like that, an ET Trojan. Now, I just coined that phrase, ET Trojan probe.
Well, so there's been reports of UFOs ejecting material. We've heard about this from Jacques Vallée and people that are investigating UFO materials. And apparently when they come into our atmosphere, sometimes they don't need all of the material that they brought with them once they're here on Earth. And they eject some of it. And this apparently is what people find sometimes when it's material from a UFO. In fact, I talked to a woman once who knew a pilot at Aviano Air Base in Italy. And his job, according to her, was to follow UFOs to locate the metals as they were ejected from the craft and kind of spot them with a laser or something so that people on the ground could pick them up. I mean,
right.
And so I'm just throwing this out there too, that sometimes these craft apparently just eject stuff that they don't need anymore. I mean, I don't know if that's what this was, but there's different ways that material can end up in our biosphere here, on the ocean or on the land. It's just that they have materials that perhaps have been used up or no longer necessary or whatever. I don't know if that's what this was, but that's not so far-fetched, David. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I could see the value in that for back engineering some of that stuff. See if it's a new element.
Exactly.
Or something I could understand that, and why they keep it so secret. Yeah, I think there's some things each government should not make publicly known, but just the fact that they are there should be exposed. And that incident of the the clear sphere.
Now,
that was something.
Talking about sparks, when we were talking earlier about the show today, you mentioned something about sparks coming from the water.
Oh my God! Then this was relayed to me from one of the other lookouts that was at my division.
Yeah,
and it was a daytime. It was a daytime view. He had the fantail watch. He had to go back there and relieve the fantail, and it's probably one of the best spots on the ship. Folks, that's the rear of the ship, the back end of the ship. And you almost can fall asleep because of the way the ship is rocking back and forth. You don't get seasick. You can go to sleep like a baby. And I used to wear dark glasses, and it kind of goes off a little bit. One time I almost got court-martialed because I didn't see the officer of the deck come by. But anyway, to continue, when he was on watch, he heard some snap. Okay, now you got these headphones on. You got your cap on your head. You're hanging on the railing, and you're looking 180 degrees from port to starboard, and you're just, but he heard these snaps, and he thought that the gulls, for example, were dropping their turds in the water as the ship screws create the foam and everything. He could see the albatross, huge birds, or beautiful birds, the albatross following the ship, waiting for ship's garbage, so they could eat.
Yeah,
and so he's just watching them, and there's got to be at least 40 or 50 of these things always following the ship out at sea that far. There's very few seagulls, but there's a lot of albatross. And they heard this popping noise. So he came closer to the railing, and he looked over the side toward the horizon. And lo and behold, he saw these lightning sparks emitting from the ocean, coming up and striking these albatross and killing them in air. I mean, their feathers, they look like they were already barbecued before they hit the water. They were like, World War II, planes being taken down. The smoke. They look. He said because their wings are so wide and long, they would glide down and crash as they were struck with these lightning bolts coming from the ocean. And this was like about 30, 40 yards off the stern of the ship.
Wow.
And the guys who were listening to this story, they go, "Oh man, what are you drinking? What are you smoking back there, dude?" He said, "Honest to God," he said, "I didn't report it to the brig. Nobody's going to believe me." But he said, "I was amazed." He says it was like lightning bolts from the. He said, maybe the ship's screws, was causing some kind of chemical reaction, or electrical charge or something. That could never. What the hell is he talking about? But he said it was like lightning bolts, and some of these bolts didn't shoot straight up to hit these birds. They would arc, like maybe to the far right. One would come up behind as the ship is creating the foam.
Yeah.
It's going through the water. It'd come up and strike a bird, different heights, and then the bird would just poof, go down and die. Hit the water. Yeah.
What's your view of what this could have been?
Personally, I think there's a mystery between the fluorescence, the chemical reaction of ship screws causing fluorescence.
Yeah.
And I think personally, if the temperature of the sea is just right and the surface temperature is just right, and you happen to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. Now, maybe the ETs on the USO were having fun with this watch. Maybe they wanted to see a reaction. They were studying human behavior. Okay?
Yeah.
And it just happened that they have a device where they can send an electrical current, like a lightning bolt, from the sea surface upward and hit these birds to see the reaction of the aft lookout.
Okay,
what am I in favor of? I'm in favor of that.
Yeah.
Because in all of the years, the ships I've been on troop carriers, aircraft carriers, destroyers, missile destroyers, cruisers. I've been on picket ships. I've never seen anything like that in my life.
Got it. David, one more thing here. And folks, any questions you have, put them in the box. Put them in the comments section. We can, just before we close up for tonight, with just any of your direct questions for David. David, you are suggesting here that there were casualties of the ship's propeller system, that it would injure sea life. Is that true?
Yeah, I never heard it was a common thing happening to mammals that follow vessels in the ocean to collect garbage thrown over the side. And I don't think the Navy does that anymore.
Right.
But we used to watch killer whales and especially dolphins and not dolphin fish, but the porpoise type dolphins. When there were big swells, it lifts the ass end of the ship up so that the screws turn at a different RPM when they're out of the water than when they are in the water. And porpoises or fishes, birds coming in to eat the garbage that's thrown overboard, I guess the conscious awareness of the screws aren't apparent until it's too late, when they all fight for the scraps, right?
Yeah.
But they get too close, and the screws, even though it's pushing the water away, it's creating a vacuum. There's a vacuum created between the screw and that propulsion physics. Sure. I can't give you the exact explanation in the physics, but I know there's a point where there's a vacuum, and that's what sucks in these dolphins or the birds or whatever it is. And when the stern of the ship comes back in after the wake subsides, then you see all the blood and guts and everything what it is. And there's been a couple killer whales and a couple dolphins and sea lions that I know when we were along the coast that happened to.
Oh, okay. That's unfortunate. We don't want to be injuring the sea life out there. They've already got enough challenges out there with all the fishing trawlers and the nets. And
well, in the famous photographs, you always see dolphins racing alongside the bow of a ship, just cutting through the water. But they don't show the ones that are following for the scraps of food over the side. And those are the ones that could be victimized by the screws. Yeah.
Right. So we've got some questions for you from our listeners, our viewers right now. The first one has to do with a man named Bill Tompkins, who was in the Navy. Have you ever read any of his works? Are you familiar with Bill Tompkins? He wrote a book called Selected by Extraterrestrials, and it's something that I've read. I think it was published by Bob Wood. Do you know Bill Tompkins at all? Have you ever heard of him?
I think I've heard the name. I'd have to hear a paragraph or something related to what maybe I understand the question.
Yeah. So it's kind of expected. I mean, I have his book here somewhere, Selected by Extraterrestrials, and I don't think I'm going to find it right now because my bookshelf is kind of big back there. But we'll save that for another discussion.
Yeah. There's a lot of fantastic literature on the subject. And this is my take on it, folks. This is my take. Whatever your let's just say, each individual is a conduit, okay, and a conductor. You can receive certain data, information, like, when a man marries a woman that he really loves, he can almost read her thoughts. He can almost anticipate what she's going to say, like a phone before it rings. You're going to pick it up pretty soon. Well, that's the way relationships are with ETs. They build a relationship with the individual because they're there at your mama as she, extracts you into life from birth. Those ETs are there, like your guardian angels. They're there for a purpose, their own, special interests. They're there. And so when I hear some stories that people have about their encounters with ETs or their visitations or their sex or abductions or they're being tagged or it's a custom thing. It's molded to fit the individual for what in a way that they're willing to accept and move on with their life, because if they're being monitored by being tagged, biologically, that's how I believe it's done from the time you're born. It's all in compliance with your genetics. It's compliant. They know us better than we know ourselves. They're not going to be sticking these electronic devices in you and just going to probe up your ass just because you're captured. No, they're in compliant with your genes, your DNA, and they just know everything about you and to what advantage is for their greater good. Okay. Yeah. And if you benefit along the way, that's a plus. Okay, that's just the way it is.
Yeah, so it's quite complex, isn't it? I know we all want this to be sort of something that's simple that we'll figure out. There'll be disclosure. We'll all understand it. But I'm getting the feeling from you, David, from our many conversations going back 2 years now, more than 2 years, that this is quite a complex relationship. They've been here a long time. Our interaction with them goes on at many different levels, and it's not something that we can just easily understand in just a few paragraphs. Is that right?
And that's the beautiful part of free choice. It's not just a word or a sentence or a directive. It's embedded in the individual. And it's a yes or no. I want to accept that. I don't want to accept that. If you don't accept what I'm saying, well, that's resistance. But there's just so much you can resist if you don't know the facts. And the fact is, your resistance lasts only as long as your life exists physically. After that, if you're not prepared for what occurs after, then you become victimized by it. And so even the good book, the Bible or the Torah or any of the good books of philosophy that gives you some hope and gives you some faith is all part of the defense system that you really need to overcome the hazards that are there. And I think the opportunity we have to say yes or nay is an awesome gift. I really do.
Exercise our free choice. Thank you, David. A couple more questions quickly.
Yeah.
Mysterious Oklahoma. This is I don't know your name, Mysterious, but this person's asking they've attended many of our live streams. every time you're on, and I think they want to know: are UFOs a type of frequency modulation? Are they frequency modulators? Whatever that would mean to you. I'm not sure I totally understand that, but do they have a resonance? I imagine they have a resonance.
Well, I think it's what you and I had discussed off screen a couple times, is that some of these UFO sightings or encounters, are projections. They're projections.
Mm-hmm.
And they are modified in a way that the recipient, the one who's going to look at it, the one who's going to see it, is going to actually fabricate the shape, the size, and the duration that it's there.
Yeah, right.
And when the response or the reaction to witnessing it is overwhelmed by curiosity that turns into fear, or it turns into excitement. Boom, the lights go out. It's gone. Boom.
Yeah.
You see? Yeah.
Good. Okay. Good.
That happens. That happens to the hologram, but it works both ways.
And we play a role in interpreting the appearance. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they know how to manipulate atmosphere. Like if on a clear night, if you look at the moon, why does it look larger at the horizon than it does when it looks bigger? It's because of magnification of the atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, they're beyond that. I mean, they're so many levels beyond that. They can use our atmosphere and the elements in our atmosphere to conjure up these things.
Mm-hmm.
And these images. It could be a ghost. It could be a UFO. It could be a mirage of a city. It could be a lot of different things. They have the way they can manipulate that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Julie wants to know: was the Finch a nuclear-powered vessel?
No. It was oil-driven. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Misha wanted to know about channeling. You've mentioned channeling a couple times. Are you talking about a specific individual or just a general idea of channeling?
No, I have a controller in San Diego that I met that took over my ET handler harvest position. And he's still in San Diego, but he's able to still communicate with me up here through vision channeling. We don't speak an alien language or English or anything like that. If I have a question, then he puts a projection in my mind's eye, and I interpret that according to my human, definitions or explanation. And sometimes I'm way off base, and sometimes he lets me know. Yeah.
Right. And just to point out, the channeling state isn't something that's particular to special people. I believe when I'm playing music, I feel like I'm channeling, music. It's coming through me. I think. Did you ever feel that, David, when you're doing art, that it's just sort of flowing through you? You don't have to think about it. It's like it's its own.
I talk this on many different points, many levels. But whatever you create or compose, Doctor, which is beautiful, I love it. Whatever I do with art and other artists or other talents, or it's all, you're just following it. You're singing along with Mitch, basically. I'll use that metaphor. It's already there. It already exists. You're just taking an instrument and revealing it, or you're just taking a brush and unfolding it. Okay, a book you're writing, it's already been written.
Yeah.
When you go through all the editing and typos and shit, like, all you're doing is taking an eraser to clear the reality of its existence.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I couldn't agree more with you, David, on that. That's exactly how I feel anything that I've ever done, and I'm sure many people have felt. It's already there. You just had to get it down on paper, right?
But here's the kicker.
Go ahead.
And all those who want to do automatic drawing and want to do healing art or whatever it is, there's already a master. It's already been created by something greater than you. Hello? So what you need to do is say thank you before you receive it. If you're going to write a story, you're going to write a music, you're going to create something on canvas, say thank you. Say thank you to the entity that has already given and produced the object in mind, whether it's from your heart, your mind, your soul. It doesn't make any difference. Give thanks.
Yeah.
Give thanks. And then it will reveal itself. If you struggle with homework, or you struggle wanting to know if, that girl's going to, or a guy's going to fall in love with you, relax and say thanks. Because the thanking could be, the best thing you did was not to find out if that's the right person for you. The thank you could be the result of something grand and masterful. So if you give thanks to the original, the originator, the one who already produced it, because it's already there, you're going to receive it. That's how it is. But people can't get that. They don't understand. Same way if you're doing your homework. You're doing your homework, you don't know math, you don't know grammar. You give thanks that the material is there. Somebody's already produced it.
Right.
All you got to do is accept it. Yeah.
Right. You start it results in advance. You start the energy flowing before you've even seen any tangible evidence of it. You start
being
to
able
feel
to grip it, being able to hang on to it.
Right.
You know how some days you wake up and you just everything just moves perfect, and some days it don't.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's because there are stumbling blocks that humans have, that they're distracted. Okay. And usually doubt, fear, anger, vengeance, all those negative things interfere with a total harmonious event occurring in your life.
Yeah. Okay, so thanks for that answer. I'm going to ask one last question from our viewers, and then we'll call it a night. So Sonny wants to know about ETs contacting children. He's referring to the Westall incident, Westall School incident in Australia in the 60s, the Ariel school incident in, I believe, Zimbabwe. Was it in the 90s, where craft had landed in the backyards of elementary schools, and large numbers of kids have seen these craft, and in some cases entities have emerged from the craft and communicated with the children telepathically. This is, by the way, very well illustrated in the newer movie, The Phenomenon, by Jamie Foxx, which you all should have seen by now. I hope you've all seen it. Goes into quite depth into the Ariel school incident. And he actually... Go ahead. What do you think's going on there, Dave? What do you think?
My point is this, and I've had the same question. I put the vision thought out there, and I've received it. Some of those are intentional. Some of them are accidental. Mm-hmm. Some of those, the transporter systems screw up some way because of the Earth's magnetic field, and they have to land, become visible, because most of the time they're invisible. Folks, listen. There are millions of them around. You just can't see them with their UFOs sitting on the ground. You can walk through them, pass through them. You can't smell them. You can't touch them, but they're there. Hello? And so some of these become materialized. And in that incident, it materialized. And whether it had a dysfunction or whatever, it's like putting on an act. It's like pretending your shoes are tied and they're not. That's the way a lot of these ET encounters happen. There's a dysfunction or something's going on. And all of a sudden they look and they say, oops, we've been seen. What do we do now? Okay, do act number 2,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a fascinating subject. When they interviewed these kids, they interviewed them as adults years later, and in the...
I think they saw it. I really do, but I think it wasn't intentional on the part of the ET.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing, Dave. And then we'll wrap it up. These kids, the film is called The Phenomenon, and again, I haven't seen all the extra. By the way, this film he did with his own money, and there was so much content to make it a good film. They had to eliminate, I think, a lot of the interviews. There's just not time if you want to get a film under 2 hours to have all these witnesses. Some great interviews with Harry Reid and so forth. And
I think that we got to come down to, you got a degree. The human psyche is such everybody's going to try to stay in unison. I don't care if they read the notes or they look at the lyrics. They're going to want to harmonize, right? So
resonance, natural resonance. These kids as adults said that what they were told, even when they were interviewed by John Mack quite a while ago, that they were told by these entities that they had to be careful of environmental degradation on the planet. This is what they all talked about, is they were shown visions of the Earth becoming barren, denuded of life, ruined.
Yeah,
and it was environmental message.
I'm going to get a lot of hits on this. I don't,
what do you think?
Human nature is, and a couple of my, episodes, I talked about that too. We need to be more considerate with Mother Nature. And
yes.
This and that. Yeah. But that's common sense reasoning and logic.
Yeah.
Hello. Now, I'm not putting anybody down who thinks that way 24/7 and has a misconception about climate control. Okay. I am talking about the fact that each person doesn't have to be in a groupie to announce this, regardless of your age. It should be an individual opportunity, because you're born with that already. You can come into this world already intuitively, instinctively. Mm-hmm. It's only by environmental conflict and contradiction do you grow up not wanting to do things like that. But inherently, you're already born with that. And to use children, I think there's, unfortunately, people ain't gonna like what I say. It's just a matter of using children to be the speaker for adults. Mm-hmm. Okay? Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry about that, and you're going to find it at many levels. Mm-hmm. You're going to find it at many levels. And that's my opinion. You don't need an ET to wake your ass up, people. Hello?
Well, they seem to have been doing that. But yeah, I think good point, Dave. We should be able to figure this out for ourselves just by going outside and looking around at the melting ice caps and the warming and all the sorts of chaos that we're wreaking on the planet, which we could, with proper, with a little foresight, we could be avoiding a lot of this, erosion and dust bowls and things that we're creating again. Subside in your state, subsiding water tables. It's going to be a big challenge for you guys in California when the water tables keep going lower. You got to start planning for that now. But anyway,
something's going to pop, and I think someone's going to come up with the idea about oxygen, air, just converting air into water automatically, instead of having to go to the streams or go to the river and desalt. There's not something's going to be, you got to do it or desalinate the oceans, or because you're going to run out there at the. No. I actually think someone's going to come up with the invention of just taking regular oxygen we breathe in and liquefy it.
Interesting idea.
Yeah, and I just want to say thank you to the.
Thank you. Yeah, everyone enjoyed it here. Listen, David, thanks very much.
There was a whole bunch more stuff I needed to talk about. Maybe we can have another show down the road.
We didn't get to half of your photos. It's just only so much we can do, and we've gone for an hour and 45 minutes. It's long enough, but I want to say thanks, everyone, for watching, first of all, participating. I really appreciate that. Questions. For everyone here, this is how we do disclosure. We have conversations. We don't need to wait for a big announcement from the President of the United States. Maybe that will never happen. I don't know. But we can start it now between us by sharing what we know. Just looking how much David has shared with us. If I hadn't responded to his, communication on one of the YouTube videos, we wouldn't be hearing all these wonderful stories and history, basically, that I wouldn't know about. So thanks, David. And
my pleasure. And you know what? I'm going to start working on that book.
Yeah.
God bless you guys. Take care.
Okay, thanks a lot, David, and thanks everyone. And we'll see you in the next episode. See you on Tuesday for Terry Lovelace, and we'll take care for now. Take care, and bye-bye.